Hello, this is Family Ghost. We have Glass Bells on the line.
Hi.
How you doing? Yeah, we
Pretty
did have a
good.
problem. Last time we had a little technical difficulty, but we've got it worked out. I've had like 3 podcasts this week, so haven't had that problem again.
That's great.
So you're a Southern California synth pop band, right?
Absolutely.
And you're the lead singer, right?
Yes.
Now, do you play synth, or is there another person in the band that plays synth?
No, that would be Anthony. He is all the music.
So that's symptoms. But you're the only one on right now, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, just to give an intro, I'm Fan Electric Ghost. I have the podcast that has the same name. We've been interviewing independent bands since 2018. We are part of the Spotify family, and we've reached 24,000 listeners worldwide. So, we're pretty excited that we've been able to still do this in this time. We sent you the question, so we're going to start there.
Okay.
So, when did you first get into music? Like, at what age?
The first time I remember really getting into music was when I was 9 after I had received a couple of CDs from my aunt for my birthday.
And so, what CDs were those?
Embarrassingly enough, it was Shakira and this other Spanish artist named Paulina Rubio.
That's
um,
interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of when I began getting my love for music. It was definitely a very not what people would expect, I think.
Well, based on your sound, just because I'm a synthesist, I'm a synth player, and I hear a lot of new wave or new romantic, 80s sounds from your band. So you've got this kind of sound that you wouldn't think, that would be what you were listening to, but you start off where you start off.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of bands, if you listen to who their influences are, they don't necessarily map to what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely different. Like when I first started getting into music, more into when I became obsessed. That's a whole other story.
We'll get to that. So we get into the question like how long you've been working on music. So when did you discover that you're a vocalist? So did you decide that that's your instrument right away, or did you start on other instruments and then grow into singing?
So basically, it started when I was 10 years old. I auditioned for a play for my school, and I was thinking I was going to get like a small role. The the play was The Trial of Alice in Wonderland, and I was thinking I was going to get, just like a small choir role, but I ended up getting the lead for Alice in the Alice in Wonderland play. So I discovered that, wow, okay, this might lead to something. So once I got on stage and sang in front of people, I basically got addicted to the on stage high.
Yeah, that's what a lot of musicians will tell you. Like, being a musician that plays an instrument, they kind of if you're a lot of guys like that play instruments, they would kind of they would have stage fright. They wouldn't be able to sing. But if you give them a guitar or a drum or a keyboard, they can get in front of somebody, and then suddenly they become like another person. So, did you feel like you could become like the other me, the other when you sing? Do you kind of become a different like version of yourself? Do you find that you get more power, that you find that you have this this other capability that allows you to feel comfortable on stage?
I would say that there's definitely another version of myself that basically comes out when I get on stage. It's like before I go on stage, I'm this nervous wreck. I'm over here, almost hyperventilating because I'm like, oh my God, we're about to get on. What is this? And the moment that first beat drops, the moment the music starts, I just all of a sudden I don't recognize who I am. I'm this entirely different person, and this like kind of more confident, version of myself comes out, and it's kind of interesting because
Yeah, that's like a thing that if you go through music history and you're like Michael Jackson, notoriously shy, but like one of the most brilliant performers ever, but very painfully shy if you try to talk to him one on one. Same thing with Prince. He's was one of the greatest performers ever, but you could hardly carry a conversation with him. He seemed like very nervous, not very secure. And it seems like a lot of creative people can do that other me, that they have this other self when they get on stage,
Yeah.
whether they're an actor or a musician or a vocalist. It's like, it seems like that creative people can do that. And then it ends up being like, sometimes like the stage ends up being the person's like only place they feel comfortable. And that can be a problem. But so you realized early you had a talent for music. When did you start deciding that you could write your own vocals or lyrics? When did you feel that you could do that? Did you start off writing your own material? Or did you? It sounds like you were in theater, so you were singing songs that were already, established. But when did you think that you had something to say? You would write your own stuff.
Well, when I was in high school, I had a lot of teenage angst. So I began writing poems, and eventually I started thinking, well, how do lyrics get written? Because I kind of saw that correlation between poems and lyrics, and I got curious about it. So then I started kind of humming my own songs and then turning that into lyrics. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized I wanted to do something with it. So I just went on Craigslist and tried to find any band who would have me. And I found my earlier project, 8am, through that, and it allowed me to get a start in creating my own music. But it wasn't until Glass Spells that it really got serious. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to a couple other people this week when I did interviews, and there is a big correlation between like singer-songwriters usually start with poetry or journals, or diaries. And I was talking to a woman in England, and she had this diary and this big collection of like poetry, and she started to go into it and then pull poetic lines and then have that start being the basis of her songs. And I've talked to a lot of artists, 40 artists in the last 2-3 years, and so many singer-songwriters, they tell me that same thing.
Yeah.
That a lot of it came from poetry, it seems interesting because it's like, I myself, that's how I started with my work. All my work came from my poetry. So I think it's like a common theme.
Yeah, it's a great outlet to express yourself. I mean, you start out learning about poetry, and then you realize that lyric writing is not too far from it.
No, it's just like once you get with a band and your poetry, then suddenly, a lot of times, like singer-songwriters, you kind of have this idea. You have all these reference points in your head, right? You have everything in your journal, everything in your poetry. And then when you hear, like, you get into a band situation and they bring a groove, then if you're, really good singer-songwriters, they can kind of recall all that stuff that's in their head, all that stuff they've been working on, and then figure out a way, kind of stream of consciousness to make that work.
Yeah.
And it seems to kind of just come out of the air.
Yeah.
Like from the muse.
It's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's like a lot of people are like, I've some people who aren't creatives, they're kind of like, well, how do you write a song? It's like, well, a lot of times if you're a musician, they just kind of come to you. And if you work with other people and you're in bands, like somebody brings a bass line, somebody brings a drum, somebody brings a keyboard pad, and then suddenly, boom, you've got an idea.
Yeah.
And it just and it's hard to describe to people who aren't creatives, like how that works, because sometimes it's not tortured. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. So your writing style and genre, I was just listening to your music, and I'll kind of give what my impressions. Like I said, it's like new wave, new romantic. And it kind of goes back to like the music I love. I'm in my 50s, right? So I grew up in the 80s, and I listened to bands like Berlin, Human League, New Order, Eurythmics, Dale Bosdale from Moving Pictures, and I heard a lot of those themes in your music, which is really cool because I grew up in that time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a big synth head, and I'm still a big proponent of those big synths. I mean, I've got Rolands, I've got Moogs, so I'm a hardware synth guy.
Oh man, that's amazing.
I have those machines because I grew up in that time, and I'm still working those
Right.
into my music. And it seems like there's a lot of people today that want that sound,
Yeah.
and I've kind of gone back to it. And so then it's like, people would tell, oh, you're Moog and you're rolling. No one cares about those anymore. But now I hear
Oh
a lot of
no.
bands that are bringing out Jupiter sounds. They're bringing out 106s, the sound like they're using Prophet 5s. I may be getting too technical, but those were the sounds of the 80s. Those synths represented the 80s sound.
I mean,
Uh,
they're great sounds, so it's no
yeah.
wonder they kind of came back into circulation.
Yeah, because you can use them in EDM. They're used in hip hop. They're used in rap. Moogs are all over rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
So I mean, so they're not really out of fashion, even though they're from the '70s and the '60s. They still create tones that people associate with electronic music.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really interesting that your sound is in that vein, which is like that's something where I live.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting. So you were drawn to like a new wave style of sound, like in your band. It's very new wave '80s sound.
Yeah.
Was that a big draw for you when you got with Glass Bells?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of the 80s, even though I didn't grow up in the 80s, but I mean, that type of music is just, I don't know, I feel like it really brings out a different emotion. It's a whole different feeling. Like bands like The Cure or, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, but that's a really awesome band from that time.
yeah, Joy Division.
Yeah,
They just have like this really dark but almost uplifting sound, which, you know,
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing about that sound, the interesting thing of it, like Joy Division was like in '78, they were like one of the first new wave bands, and they had a kind of very gothic sound, but they introduced like this synthesizer sound, and later bands like Depeche Mode and The Cure like flushed it out, and
mhm,
even the remaining members of Joy Division became New Order, which was one of the premier synth new wave bands of any era, and they're still around. Um,
yeah.
but it's just like that sound. What's cool about it, it kind of is post punk. You got it's coming out of that punk movement with
Yeah.
the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and then they start introducing like synthesizers, which then what it did is it took that punk sound and it started to craft it, and so it actually had more melody and it had more tones where you could be a little softer or you could be gothic or you could be a little Victorian, and you get this whole idea where you get the Human League and bands like The Cure. And it just opened up things in so many different ways that people could be, like you look at Prince, you look at the Human League, with David Bowie, this whole kind of gender bending thing going on in the sounds. It was a very open time. It was kind of like the '60s in a way. And people were very open to new ideas. And in new wave, you can go in any direction.
Yeah.
Um, and it can leave it wide open. And it's actually songcraft, where a lot of things today, like you get into EDM or other forms like your hip hop, sometimes it's not as more beat oriented,
Hmm.
but new wave is kind of song oriented.
Yeah.
So I that's why I was interesting that you were into that, because like a lot of things going on today are more beat or clip based, but
Hmm.
your band is really kind of songcraft based.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we really do get a lot of our inspiration from a lot of like that 80s sound. Also with Stranger Things bringing out that sound again.
Yeah,
That's been a huge drive in our latest sound.
yeah. They were famous for their use of the ARP 2600, which is like that the way they sound is kind of a synth called an ARP 2600, and it has a unique sound. It was used by Stevie Wonder, it was used by Pete Townsend from the Who on the song, famous Who song, "Who Are You."
Hmm.
It's a very distinctive synth. Every time you can like note it on certain songs, everybody knows where it was used. And it just is just it's just an iconic synth, and it is really associated with the '80s because it survived. It's like it was built from like '74 to 1981,
Yeah.
and then it was still used all the way into the '90s, even though the company went out of business. But everybody still uses them, and they actually came back this year.
Oh
That
wow.
kind of shows you the ARP 2600 Korg reissued it this year,
Whoa.
and it is So it's the exact version from like the 74. So that's what's interesting today. In the same way that I'm talking to bands like you,
Mm-hmm.
like Moog and Roland and ARP, all those synthesizers are associated with new wave.
Yeah.
You can find brand new versions of them,
Yeah.
and
I'm
that's interesting.
yeah, definitely. Just to know that all these businesses can basically spring up out of nowhere once that trend kind of comes back to life. That's really
Well,
cool.
there's so many, not just the new wave, but a lot of like synth wave, trance artists, EDM art DJs are starting to like not just buy beats, to buying synths again, so they can actually make their own sounds.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it's
and that was yeah,
I feel like it's becoming very mainstream, which I don't personally think it's a bad thing. Some people would say it is, but I think it's great. Like Lady Gaga with her new album
yeah,
Chromatica,
very
she
very synth.
yeah, she brought back out that sound, and I mean, The Weeknd, his
Yeah,
latest album uses a lot of those sounds as well, which is really shocking. That it's just come back into circulation and that it's just so mainstream now.
yeah. I think because I mean, I talk to a lot of bands that are in the kind of non-mainstream, but there is a tendency now to kind of merge things. I'm a heavy analog guy, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like your like hardware analog, but I have digital stuff too. But there is a appreciation. I think every generation goes back. My generation, we appreciated the Beatles. Now
Mm-hmm.
we were like heavy into the Beatles, and we're romanticizing the Beatles all the time. And so it makes a lot of sense that that in this era that people would romanticize that period because it's a very musical period.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
and there's like multiple things that come from that time. You get Van Halen, you get Prince, you get New Wave, you get Michael Jackson. You have so many different things were going on in the '80s. The music was very, you had MTV, you had this whole era where there was a heavy focus on, very interesting music. It was a very interesting time, and it was very prolific for a lot of bands.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think a lot of people will dive into that, and it's interesting that that's where you are. But I don't think it's a bad thing to be like in the top, 50 or in a popular sound. It's kind of like what you do with that sound.
Right.
And I think what you guys are doing is it's not exactly like that you're trying to be the Human League or you're trying to be
Right.
your rhythmics. You are yourself, you
Yeah.
know, and you have a unique sound. But we know that that's where the heart of it might have come from. But it's a really good testimony to your band's craft. I really like some of the songs. Like I've been listening to like Night Hour and Mirrors and Psychic Lovers, Empty Road, Don't Save Me off of your Mirrors EP. And I'm digging that stuff big time.
Oh, thank you so much.
So maybe I'll get into like the first track, Night Hour. Like, how did you? What's the story behind that song? Maybe you could talk about that. We like to get into that.
Let's see, Night Hour. Basically, Anthony just sent me the lyrics, some lyrics. He always kind of says, "Hey, I have a line idea, and here's the song I was thinking of while thinking of this line. See what you can do with it." And I was like, "Okay, let's see." So basically, give me just a moment to really think about it because there's like 5 songs in there that like have similar origins. I mean, I definitely felt like it did have a more darker tone to it, but it was almost uplifting in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it has that kind of thing that there is the idea of the new romantic.
Right.
Like, yeah, because the idea of like everybody remembers New Wave, but New Wave started as what was called New Romantic, and it was kind of gothic, and it has some elements that kind of maybe like Evanescence has that kind of thing where it's kind of a little dark,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's still catchy, and it's still kind of like you get that with Churches. Like if you listen to
Oh
Churches, they're
yes.
another band. What the interesting thing about Churches, their stuff is sounds very uplifting, right? It sounds
Mm-hmm.
very poppy, but if you listen to the lyrics, they're very dark.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a trick, because you listen to that band, it's like, oh, you can get the beat, you can swing to it, you can dance to it, but then you really listen to read her lyrics, and you're like,
Right.
wow, this is
You're like, oh man, this is really dark.
this is very heavy. But that was something about new wave or new romantic music that you could do. You could have a very have a beat that's really getting people involved on a dance floor, but it was saying something. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just like a clip or a beat. It's actually kind of, there's a depth to it. And that was always the thing I liked about it, because it's kind of like a secret hook.
Right.
If you people who don't want to care about lyrics, they not think about it. But people
Mm-hmm.
who did want to dive into it, put their headphones on and say, wow, this part's for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what mainly draws me to this type of music, because I like that expression, because I feel like it kind of like embodies a little bit of who I am. Like anyone who meets me is like, wow, you're so bubbly and uplifting, but like there's a dark side, there's like this, like, I don't want to say like sad, but like, there's like this very
Yeah, it's
like
what melancholy.
melancholy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Melancholia is a big part of like gothic new wave or new romantic. I mean, Joy Division was like the epitome of the melancholy, maybe too heavy. And Joy Division, when Joy Division disbanded and it became New Order, they never really went that dark again. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe because of what happened to Ian, but
Yeah.
it was, it started with that kind of dark piece of it, and you get bands like Depeche Mode to continue that, that piece of it. So that's always been in the new wave. It's always been something that you could kind of sneak that in. You see even today, like I mentioned with churches, that you can, what you're doing on night hours, kind of like the same thing that goes back to what Joy Division did.
Yeah.
And
Um,
in Depeche Mode, but
yeah, definitely when I was writing that song, I said, okay, it's like really upbeat, but there is kind of like there is that like romantic side of it too. So that's where I kind of started making the chorus a little more romancy,
yeah, that kind of, the interesting thing about the new romantic period is there's like a lot of like Victorian poetry, um, like a lot of Wordsworth, a lot of Blake and Tennyson kind of sneak their way into new romantic stuff, because it's kind of the whole idea of romantic coming from that Victorian romantic poetry era. They like the new wave era kind of took elements of those classic poets, and the idea there's a lot of sadness in that poetry. It's supposed to be romance, but it's really kind of gothic and sad. And
Right.
a lot of poets and musicians and writers kind of took pieces of it. And even like the dress of new wave artists, it comes from the Victorian period. Prince wearing his ruffled jackets
Oh
and The
yeah.
Cure, and all the bands were basically looking like what Victorian people used to look like. Um, so it's kind of interesting that's kind of this kind of merging of genre, this kind of gender bending thing, and then this idea of having kind of deep, meaningful lyrics that kind of emote emotion,
Right.
which was really the whole idea of it. But it's interesting that people still get drawn to it. So a
Yeah.
song like Mirrors, what can you maybe talk about that one too?
So Mirrors was the second song that I wrote when I joined Glass Bells, because there was the Glass Bells before I joined it, and we kind of started getting more into this more synthwave sound after I joined the band.
Mm-hmm.
So for the second song, we wanted to make something very dancey, something that's like very sorry.
That's okay. Get some water. Get some water if you need some water.
Yeah. Sorry, need a second. Caught some air there.
Yeah, it happens.
So yeah, with mirrors, Anthony sent me the words, "I see you through the broken mirror, see your reflection broken apart," and he sent me like this really upbeat tune, and I'm like, huh. I'm like, well, this kind of makes me think of like, when you're out partying, you're at a bar or something, and maybe you've drunk a little too much, you go into the bathroom, and then you see your reflection, and you're just like, uh-oh.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I am drunk. I need to like wake up. I need to get 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 it together. So I just kind of took that experience and just turned it into like this fun song, but also the lyrics are very dark because you're kind of like, okay, I'm a little too gone, like help me get back to myself, but at the same time I'm having fun. But
that's interesting again, because like another romantic poetry idea
yeah.
um, is this idea of the looking glass, which is the mirror. Like the
Oh,
Victorians used to call it the looking glass, which is the same thing as a mirror. It's another word for it, but
boy.
they used to always talk about this idea of the other me
Right.
that is in that looking glass, and you can find it in like Wordsworth and Tennyson and all these poets. And it's interesting that it ends up being something that you find in a lot of new wave music.
Yeah.
whether people realize it or not, it just seems to kind of come. The idea of the looking glass in the mirror seems to be in that music. I mean, it's in a lot of other musical forms, but it's interesting that the new wave music tends to have a lot of it because it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's very emo, very emotional,
Right.
very gothic, and there's going to be a natural reflection, and as artists tend to like, okay, well, the mirror can kind of represent that other person that maybe is me.
I never looked at it that way.
Yeah, you might
But
just,
that's interesting.
yeah, you can kind of get to it. People maybe didn't know that, but it kind of finds itself. The music seems to drive it. It's weird, but yeah, that type of music over time, I just have seen that theme a lot. But it's cool, and I've always liked to dive into it myself. But yeah, so what other songs were songs that you wrote specifically on the albums?
So one of the ones that is near and dear to my heart is Empty Road. Um, that song, I gotta say, has got to be the darkest song I've ever written in my life.
So where'd that come from?
It's funny because when I wrote it, I was actually in a good place. I was pretty happy. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna write this song. And then I wrote the lyrics, and then I read that back, and I'm like, whoa, this is really dark. I ended up writing it about limbo,
Mm-hmm.
about being in a place where like maybe after you've gotten into an accident, you're kind of struggling between the fine line of life and death, and it's very near and dear to my heart because I feel like I really reached in a place inside myself where I never thought I could really go, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's as a songwriter, you want to be able to convey. I think what the cool thing about being a singer songwriter is when you're a singer songwriter, you tend to dive into things that maybe people wouldn't go where they wouldn't go, and I
right.
think a lot of the audience appreciates singer songwriters because they might not be able your fan might not be able to express that feeling, but your
Mm-hmm.
fans come to you because you were able to express it. And so they find something in your lyrics that they feel the same way, and then they find an artist that reflects that. And singer songwriters have to kind of pull from pain. I mean, a lot of times the great artists, they pull from a personal experience or being able to empathize with
Mm-hmm.
personal experience and then relay it as a creative person. And I think that's why people get drawn to that type of music rather than if you have a band and you don't have, you have like a big producer just trying to make a hit.
Right.
Not that that's not good, but when you
Mm-hmm.
have a singer songwriter, you tend to get a little more depth than just, something that's like just catchy.
Right.
Something that actually is meaningful. And you can be meaningful and catchy and have a groove, but it tends that the independent artists or artists that are singer songwriters tend to have that honesty in their music.
Yeah, and I definitely um, understand how that could be, when I wrote Empty Road. I mean, the other songs we did get a little help from our producer with some things, tweaking things here and there, but Empty Road was just kind of one of those songs where I was like, okay, here's the deal. Like this
It's the way you
really,
want it.
like this is how I want it. Like I don't want to, sound like, I'm being too like, I guess, possessive over the song.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like being too, snooty about it. That definitely wasn't my intention, but I did let our producers know, hey, look, I have an idea for the song. Like, this is how I want it to go. It's something that came out of a very, very personal place, and I just like it to stay how I intend it to stay. Because, it's kind of hard giving up something that you really feel strongly about, and
yeah,
then just like if someone like kind of twists it into something that looks completely different. I mean, sometimes yes, that is good because they'll make it a hit and everything, but sometimes you got to kind of draw that line of, okay, how important is this to you? And like, I mean,
yeah.
even if it may not be the most popular song, you're proud of it, it's something that came from your soul.
Well, I think that's the thing about being a musician. A lot of times, like I've been a musician, like I'm like 50 in my 50s, and I've gone the route of working with producers. I've worked with bands, and I'm now working primarily by myself. Though I do have some arrangements where I'll work with somebody, and I know they're gonna like radically change my stuff, but it's because I'm willing to do
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other stuff that I do that's all me because like I'm at the age where I know what I want, I know the way I want to do it, so I'll distribute that stuff on a different channel, right? But
Right.
but if there's something, okay, well I'm trying to do something where I'm gonna make a hit, then I'll compromise. But when I've
Mm-hmm.
got something that's like really near and dear to my heart, and I'm trying to really, express it, then I'll be a total control freak, and I'm like, this is exactly what it's going to be because this is what I'm doing. And I think all artists have that point when they're working with people that I would know they stand for by what their original belief is. And
Mm-hmm.
it depends on where you are in your career. There's some points where you're willing to compromise because you've got the same goal, and everybody, especially when you're in a band. If you're in a band, then it tends to be a compromise. Everybody's putting in a piece of it. If you're a
Exactly.
solo artist, you can do more control, or you could let your producer control it.
Right.
It's just a matter like a lot of times producers will take over everything, and you have to kind of exert yourself to keep them from doing it because that's what they do.
Right.
Um,
I
yeah,
mean, that's what you kind of pay them to do.
they will do it, but you've got to kind of let them know how much of you want in the song,
Right.
because a lot of it will be them.
Mm-hmm.
Producers will say, "Oh, I'm doing you," but a lot of times they're doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine, and that's why you went to them because
Yeah.
you like what they're doing, but you want to still maintain part of your own character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of fine line when artists have to work with recording engineers. Are the same thing because you could do your mix right and give it to a recording engineer, and then they emphasize something that you're like, okay, well that works or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on what was in your head.
Right.
And if you're more like sure of what you want, then you might challenge your recording engineer and say, I really wanted to emphasize this,
Right.
not that. And I think that comes with experience where you say, okay, you know what you want or you don't know what you want, or you just know where you are.
Yeah.
At any age, you can know where you want to do. I mean, Prince was 17 and he produced himself, and
Yeah.
they wanted him to work with Earth, Wind, and Fire's producer, and he said no. He knew what he wanted, and he created the sound because he was able to say he could have ended up sounding like Earth, Wind, and Fire. He could have sounded like Kool and the Gang. He could have just been any like other R&B artist that kind of let producers control him.
Mm-hmm.
But he decided that he had a vision that became the Minneapolis sound because he was willing to you know, stick up for it.
Yeah. And look at that. Now he's one of the most memorable musicians in the entire world.
And at 17, he knew to do that. So, that's my thing is like you can know, like I'm 55, and I'll say that because of experience, but he did that age 17, which that takes a lot
Oh,
of guts
yeah.
as a brand new artist. And they're telling you they're going to get you Maurice White to be your producer, and you say no. I'm going to do it
Yeah.
myself. And I don't know how Warner Brothers let them do that, but they did, and it was a good thing they did.
Yeah, definitely.
But so before the lockdown, before Corona, were you guys playing active shows in the Southern California?
Yeah, we were. We were actually playing quite a bit of shows. Our hometown San Diego, we played venues such as the Casbah, Soda Bar, Space Bar. We had most recently gotten invited to play Music Box by our local radio station as part of their local break series. Yeah,
cool.
and we got to play with Meg Myers. So that was really, really cool. And we also got to play in Los Angeles and we took the occasional road trip to Anthony's hometown in Calexico.
So you've been mostly Southern California area?
Yeah, and we had planned for a tour that was a little more expanded, more towards other parts of California and even Arizona, and maybe even other
And then
states. But then COVID came along, and
yeah. So that kind of goes into what's your strategy? I mean, you do have a 2020 release. Mirrors is a 2020 release. So are you planning on doing like online and more video because you can't do shows? Or are you thinking of doing like video live casting and different things? What are your plans as a band in COVID to kind of keep things going forward?
So we're definitely trying to push out these 5 songs and just try to get as many outreach as we can with it. We're also trying to do like videos here and there. Like today we just released the Night Hour lyric video. Yeah,
Cool.
originally
Down YouTube.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's on YouTube and on our Instagram TV. So we're just trying to do the best we can. I mean, I'm in my own house, so is Anthony, and so is our drummer Michael. So it's really hard for us to get together, especially during these COVID times, because it's just a little too risky.
Oh yeah, and then like now in California, things have kind of ramped back up. So
right. So
that's not disappointing because I'm in the Northeast. I'm in New Hampshire. We're kind of like luckily we kind of stayed like in a good place so far.
You guys are so lucky.
but we're still kind of in a potential lockdown just because this is the United States and people travel.
Right.
And so we get a lot of people from Florida to come into New Hampshire, and we're kind of worried that Florida's rates are like really high. Yeah. And so we would kind of clean things up, and we were at a very low rate. But now we might get a lot of people who came back from Florida and have kind of brought it back.
Yeah, it's all a very messy situation for sure.
So live shows are kind of like, I myself have been doing a lot of Twitch and a lot of Facebook Live, and I even got a booker. First time I got an international booker, and then they're like, "Oh, we can't get you in these live venues." And I got an international booker where I was gonna play like Europe and Asia, and then this whole thing now, man. Like Americans, we can't even go into Europe.
Oh yeah, that's right. Standard. Yeah.
So I'm like, oh great, like I just got an international European booker, and I can't even get over there. But they just told me like, oh, we're gonna start doing online. I was like, okay, great, let's see where that goes. But yeah, it's like in this time, I'm doing this podcast, which I've been doing for 2 years as another thing to kind of keep my brand going. So as an artist, have you guys thought about like sync licensing or working on like features or doing production work with other bands to keep like yourselves busy, or you're just focused on your own stuff?
We're definitely trying to look into getting on different television shows. We're trying to get what do you call it?
I think it's like the sync licensing where you get like your stuff into, that's like the term, but yeah, it gets your work into like movies and TV and ads and like like pitches for Madison Avenue pitches where you can. But the only kind of double-edged sword of that is if you get one of your tunes on a 30-second clip, and then it kind of gets like overdone. But then you get the benefit of that. You can actually make more money than you would on like anything.
Yeah.
For that, but then it might it's a double-edged sword if it becomes like too catchy.
Yeah, definitely.
So you have to kind of like balance it, but yeah, that's the cool thing about being a kind of musician I am, is like I can kind of do clips and I don't have to associate them with my band. I can just do like synth work and then get it put in different places. It doesn't necessarily have to be known as a ghost
Yeah.
song. It's just something I make money and I don't actually try to associate with it.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely trying to get into that, and that's a big goal of ours. But I guess it just really we'll see where it goes. As far as live streaming goes, it I am trying to look into it, but like I said, it's really hard for all of us to get together just because we really don't want to risk it. Um,
Yeah, it's hard to do as a full band.
yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe if
yeah,
anything, I could try to do something with just vocals, but again, I need to have really good quality uh, stuff to make that live stream be worth it. Um,
yeah. I mean, over time at my home studio, I kind of built up a capability that I've been live streaming for like 3 years,
yeah.
and I just use my home studio capabilities to do it. But yeah, there are all kinds of devices now
Hmm.
that are out there. Like Roland makes like devices that you can actually link your iPhone
Oh.
to think like a Go mixer. It's like $100 little mixer that allows you to use your iPhone as a camera, and it takes in a feed, and you could actually send it like a WAV
Hmm.
file and then sing over it. And it even has a thing that allows you to kind of do karaoke over your own music because it kind of
Yeah.
brings the vocal down, and then you could like sing to your own track. And that's only like, not that I'm pushing Roland, but there are inexpensive tools that allow you to do live casting that aren't that expensive and allow you to do interesting things that you could kind of sing over a track or something, and you do a live performance. And a lot of people use them to do like acoustic, like what you would call unplugged type performances, so they can do that on the YouTube channels and stuff. So it gives people, it's key, you get to still connect with your fan in an intimate way that might be different than what your normal live show would be.
Right. Yeah.
So then your fans might appreciate it because it would be a little bit different than what you normally do.
Yeah, it's certainly not a bad idea.
Just an idea, because I've been talking to a lot of people who've been kind of going that way because nobody knows when we're going to be able to get back on the road. So there are all kinds of cool things that you can
Yeah,
do.
kind of like sink or swim, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool devices like use two iPhones as two different cameras. So it allows you to not have to buy a video camera. You can just have, if you have two iPhones, you can like share them and then have different camera angles on the broadcast. So there are things you can do without spending thousands of dollars. You can take equipment you already have and use it with your laptop and stuff. And it's not terrible. It's just a matter of like looking it up. But yeah, I'm always trying to give people ideas just because I do it myself. So
Well, thank you.
and um, yeah,
Yeah,
so
definitely something to look
we
into.
yeah, just because you don't know how long it's going to be, and if it's I don't know if venues are ever going to really open until there's a
Oh
vaccine.
boy.
So the
Yeah.
people might have to figure out different ways. I mean, I've seen one thing that was interesting. I saw a classical musician in Europe that actually he put house plants into all the seats in the
Oh,
venue, and then did a performance and then live streamed it. And so they were on stage, and there was nobody in the audience but plants.
wow.
But they were able to get on stage and film it and then have it go out. So I mean, and I've seen like EDM DJs go to the top of roofs and film like a DJ set on top of a roof.
So cool.
Where they're just, so there are ways to kind of rethink. It's like, well, how can I do something? Maybe I could do a performance somewhere where there's no audience, but I stream it,
Mm-hmm.
and or so it's socially distant and it's live and people get to see it. So I've seen a lot of innovative stuff start happening where people are trying different things. So I think that's where people have to kind of think out of their
Yeah,
box.
definitely.
So what are your opinions of like the future of music? It's one thing we like to talk about because we're able to talk because you're on Spotify. We found you on Instagram. What are your thoughts of the way social media works with like musicians today?
Well, I think definitely one thing is certain is that music is here to stay, and no matter what platform and no matter what way, I mean, it's definitely not going anywhere. I think it's pretty great that people have access to tons of music at literally a push of a button. But I do believe that artists should be maybe getting a little more pay for plays. I mean, I'm sure as
that's the big complaint.
yeah, I mean, as an artist, we work very hard on our music, and it can sometimes get a little discouraging when you find that you're not seeing as much revenue from your investment. Not that that's the ultimate goal, but sometimes
Yeah,
that same money that you make from the streaming, from the merch and everything, it all ends up going back into the band. But
yeah,
I mean, yeah.
yeah. I think the big problem we have is yeah. I grew up in a time where the only way you could get your music is they had to go to Strawberry's Records and tapes there, or walk into a record store and pick up the vinyl or pick up the cassette or pick up the CD. And in those days, the problem is like if you were a band, you could play in a bar doing cover band stuff, but you'd never get picked up by a label and you couldn't get your music out.
Right.
So you go play at a pizza place, or you play at some little dive somewhere, and so you're able to get out and play, but you hardly made any money, and you couldn't get your music anywhere unless you made a cassette and sold out the back of your truck.
Right.
And so the cool thing when SoundCloud showed up, I jumped on that, and I was like, wow, I can actually get my music out there. And so that is like how I got to this podcast. People found me on SoundCloud, and then I got I noticed, and I got brought into this whole idea of doing podcasts from my audience based on SoundCloud, and then I got onto Spotify. But the problem, it is, like we only get paid pennies,
Right.
less than pennies, and I think it also has to do with what happened with Napster.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When people found out that you could just get music for free, and then iTunes came along and people had to pay, but then streaming came there, and so that the income stream has people don't pay $9 for music
Right.
anymore. And I think the big problem I have is the audience today will spend like $60 on an Xbox game,
yeah,
but they won't spend $9 on their band.
Yeah.
The band they love.
I mean, you really have to have those hardcore dedicated fans to really spend that dollar on that one track.
Yeah. I mean, they might go and download one track, but they won't buy $10 worth of track. And so my whole thing is a lot of times a lot of bands I've talked to, they make more money selling T-shirts than they do from the record, and I think that I always stress to all the fans out there, if you love a band, download their songs, go to Amazon and buy it, or go to some distributor where you can actually pay the band the larger share. So if you can actually pay for the download instead of just streaming a download, if you love that band, they need help.
Yeah.
Like DoorDash is helping all these restaurants. Well, go to Amazon and buy the download. Go to iTunes and buy the download, or go to their website and buy their CD, because it's the same idea. Creative people are working people as well, and I don't want to be preaching to the choir, but I believe that if people love music, you got to keep it here and you got to support it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one of the pros and cons that come with streaming services. Whereas before, people, if they wanted to keep listening to your music, they would have to buy a CD or,
like I said,
yeah, whatever that that medium was. But now it's so accessible that people don't think twice about buying a physical copy or even buying a download of something, because they're like, well, I can just stream it for free, so what's the point? But at the same time, it's also good that your music is getting heard by a lot of people,
Well, that's the other piece of it. Like now your fan base, I got a fan base from this podcast. It hits every country on the planet. We're hitting 24,000 listeners. From when I first started, I only had 1,200. And then I get to talk to people in Berlin, in Tokyo, in Norway, in the Netherlands. So the technology that allows us to stream and do podcasts allows us to reach, people that we couldn't reach.
Right.
Before.
We don't need the labels to distribute the music.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what happens then is just your booking agent and your managers, uh, if they can get you, the gigs, if they can get you in front of people, if they can get you a good deal, so that you can maybe do some vinyl, because like vinyl is very lucrative. That's the one format that fans seem to want to buy.
Yeah.
Like what I found, like in New York, if I go to do a show with the Ghost and I bring vinyl, I can sell like 100 vinyls and I'll make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'll make more money on 100 vinyls than I will on my
Right.
Spotify. And it's actually very cost effective, and people like it because then you can sign it, you can do artwork, you can get the fan engaged, which was the cool thing about vinyl in the first place, which was like it really got your fan engaged because they had to listen to your whole project.
Right.
Right. If you had vinyl back in the '70s, I go listen to a Led Zeppelin album. I wouldn't go skipping around it. I go in a basement with my friends and we listen to the whole thing. And I think that's kind of been missed on the playlist era. Is like people's projects sometimes don't get listened all the way, but if people buy the vinyl version of your record, they tend to listen to the whole project.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's a good way to engage your fan, and get them into it. And there are ways to do that. And so I think that's a worthwhile thing that I found is very worthwhile, and one medium that fans seem to still really love. You don't have to go crazy printing 1,000 of them.
Right.
You can print hundreds of them at a time and do pretty well with your fan base. Just an idea.
No, it's a wonderful idea. Please keep them coming.
But yeah, so we're glad to talk to bands like yourself out there. What are your thoughts about what you're going to do going into 2021 and where are you going to be? Are you working on new music, or are you just focused on this latest release?
So we already have like maybe 5 more tracks lined up right now that we're currently working on. So I expect we should have a release at some point in the next, I'm hoping by 2021 that these songs will be polished out and ready to go. It did take us like a whole year to crank out these other ones, just because the whole process into getting it from start to finish is very long. But we're hoping that these songs will do well enough to allow us to crank out more songs in the future. And then hopefully by the time we're able to crank out these other 5 sets of songs, maybe even 10, since we have a lot of time on our hands.
Well, you might be more than an EP, might be a full LP.
Exactly. Yeah. We're hoping that by the time it gets to 2021, we'll be able to have an entirely new live set, although I do expect that probably the first show is going to be a little awkward.
Oh yeah, it takes the guy to get back into practice if you haven't been able to
right,
play.
Like, oh, hey everyone, long time no see. Hi.
Yeah, that's why I've been trying to coordinate with other artists and do collaborations, but it's still hard to kind of do a live like collaboration on the net.
Oh yeah.
It like what most of the time I do with people is like I get a file, I send a file back, we go back and forth, maybe we do a Skype and we'll listen to it together, and then we'll make comments about something and kind of be going back and forth. And we might be playing in our own studios, but we're not really synced up enough to play together. That's one thing I would hope somebody in this time period comes up with a technology with one of the digital audio workstations like Logic that allows you to do online collaboration in real time.
Yeah, because that's definitely one of the big challenges right now as we're writing these new songs. It's normally me and Anthony who get together, and then I go and record with our drummer Michael. But during this time, we're just sending files back and forth through email, we're texting, we're just not really playing in real time. I don't get to have the occasional band practice where I'm like, hey, so this is what I thought of the song. What do you think? I have X, Y, and Z ideas, So if someone could come up with a real-time video chat thing or something that like could allow us to play, like you said, in real time, that'd be great. I think.
What would be cool? It'd be like using FL Studio or Logic with a video interface, that would allow you to actually see each other and then hear each other and be able to deal with the lag time. Because I mean, Roland has some video products that actually allow you to kind of correct for the video lag and the audio
Mm-hmm.
lag. There's technology already that Roland has that does that. And so the question would be is like integrate that with a DAW, and then you could actually have your band do a practice, and you could actually real time be able to kind of vibe up off each other like you were in the studio.
Man, that's a pandemic dream.
I think there's gonna be somebody's gonna do it. A couple of years ago, there was a company that was trying to do it. They never got it to work right. But I think it's more like I think you got to get companies like Roland and Logic to kind of get together
Right.
and do a combined technology between two companies that are good at both things. And so you get two companies that are really good at that, and I could really be a big thing. So I've been pushing this out. Every time I talk to people, I kind of throw it out there, hoping that one of these companies hears
Yeah.
it. Because it's something I think all musicians in this time we need something like
Yeah,
that.
and even
That
beyond this time, we would still need that because there are some times where like the whole band can't get together because, schedules don't match up or something where someone's away on some other they're in some other state or whatever, you know?
yeah. It would be very useful for a lot of people. I think it would be something. And given the technologies with 5G and the internet getting faster and faster and people's capabilities getting better and better, we're actually at a point where I think it could be done. I'm a technology guy myself in my day
Mm-hmm.
job, so I do not think there is a technological real limit to be problem with doing that. It's just somebody hasn't figured it out. But it's not that the technology wouldn't support it. It's just a matter of like whether or not companies think they actually enough bands will buy it. I think in the world where you would go to the studio and you say, "Why would I do that?" But in the COVID world, you know, I think it was like, "Oh, that we could make money."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great talking to you. And this is going to go out tonight
Oh,
within an hour.
awesome.
We are on 11 podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast, Radio Public, many, many more. And we'll send you like the top 3 links from like Spotify, Apple, maybe Radio Public, and then also the anchor link. And we're also integrated with Instagram. So the Spotify version of this podcast can be set up as a highlight, and we'll do it on our expansive sound site. So if people click on it, it'll go right to this
Oh,
podcast.
that's cool.
Yeah, you could do the same thing on your story if you want to. But so we're happy to have you on the show. When you have that new project, we have the ability to actually be able to have people at different locations. I can send this link to multiple people. So if you want to have the full band on next time we talk, we could actually do
Yeah,
that.
that sounds great.
Yeah, thank you very much for being on.
Oh, thank you so much for
Glass
having
spells,
me.
everyone. Yeah, glass spells, everybody. Go out to all the streaming services that you're on and play their music as much as you can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Support the bands you love. Glass spells, everybody. Thank you for being on the show. We'll talk to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.